Kingsley saw them go by with their guns and went chasing to see where they're going. Unarmed guy in his late 20s at the time, just sprinting after 15 armed men. And then he heard the shooting, and they had attacked a school and killed a bunch of kids. And so Kingsley called me from the school, and I was pacing around in the backyard here, and I could just hear people screaming. I'm like, we are a freaking soccer company. Like, this is way more than we can manage. Welcome back. We are going to talk today about the B7 Foundation, the nonprofit that we run. We run several companies, some are for-profit companies, but we also have this nonprofit. So today we'd like to talk a little bit about the 4 T's of giving. The 4th T is the one that we came up with, what we do, what our nonprofit does, what it started out doing, what it is now, and then, just talk about what the impact has been of being both genuine and strategic, right? That's a phrase that's really important to us. Only we know whether or not we're genuine, and that's true for everybody. We know inside if we're being genuine, and if we execute that genuine desire to help people in a strategic way, it's amazing the multiplication that happens in the amount of people that we can bless. So I'm excited to talk about this today. This is something that we have been doing for 12 years without talking about it. At the end of last year, we said, this is our year. We're going to start talking about it and start telling the story. And it's pretty incredible, the doors that have opened and the things that have started to happen now that we started actually telling people that we're more than just a little kid soccer program. Internally, all of our employees have known for a long time, but we're starting to tell other people. So today's the day. Today's the day where we talk about it and we share why it's better together.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Let's do it.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You look beautiful.
Thanks. We have a for-profit business, and we use the funds that are generated from the profit from our for-profit to fund our nonprofit, right?
Yep. A registered 501c3 called B7 Foundation. The B is from our last name, and the 7 is from the amount of people in our immediate family. B7 Foundation.
So we have 5 children. Our last name is Barkey, and so we called our nonprofit B7. Barkey Family Super 7. That's us. We started this nonprofit many years ago, and it just kind of happened.
Picked up steam. It was a side hustle of many projects, and it's turned into an entire organization.
We started this entire thing on one donation project. When we had barely anything, we were broke as a joke, and there was a need. Who grew up in the Amazon rainforest in Peru and got a childhood friend. He's a local Peruvian guy.
Don't I look like it? I look like someone who you would imagine. You'd see walking down the street.
He's Peruvian.
You're like, that guy right there.
For sure.
For sure grew up in the Amazon rainforest. Blue eyes, blonde hair, white pasty skin. Definitely from the jungle. It's a dot that everyone connects.
Right. Nevertheless, you had a childhood friend named Leo, and this was in 2012. We were in the early startup years of our business. We started a business called Soccer Shots. It's a children's soccer program for 2 to 8-year-olds. We train them in skills development and character lessons through the platform of soccer. In those early years, we were just really trying to make ends meet. We were struggling. We were on the struggle bus and trying to pay our bills and get this thing off the ground.
Long time passengers on the struggle bus.
Leo reached out because he heard that we were doing this Soccer Shots thing. And essentially, he was trying to do the same thing in Peru, in the middle of the jungle. He had 40 kids in his program, 4 flat soccer balls, 1 broke down motorcycle, and
he was getting up before dawn and hiking.
Really didn't know anything about business.
He was hiking like 2 hours to go train these kids.
Right.
No one was paying on time or at all. He didn't know the business side. He had played soccer professionally, and then he played for the Peruvian national team. And so his soccer capacity was not in question.
Right.
He was also a full-time youth pastor for a large church, which is also a full-time job.
Yeah.
And so just incredible the bandwidth of what he's able to do. And he's wired to bet on himself. And so he had everything lined up to be an entrepreneur. and to do this really well, but he had no training. He had no access to basic knowledge of entrepreneurship, and he had no ability to access loans or anything like that, which is really typical of a developing country where you just can't get the capital to launch, right?
Very limited resources
very limited.
overall. So he reached out to us and he was like, hey, can you help me? And we were like, what could we do? I mean, we have nothing. Yeah. But we knew that we had more than he had, right? We had very little, but we had more than Leo. So we were like, okay, sure, we're going to help you. You're like, we're going to bring 200 soccer balls. We're going to bring pennies, goals. We're going to come down to the jungle and we're going to teach you everything we know about business. And we're doing it in April. And
we had no money.
No money. We had 2 little boys. I was pregnant with our 3rd child. And you committed to this. What made you
Name it, then claim it.
Right. What made you say yes?
Man, I believe that there are 4 T's to giving. You can read about it in all the books, the 3 T's of giving: time, treasure, and talent. Alliteration makes it easy to remember. We give of our time, we give of our treasure or our financial resources, and we give of our skill set, our talent that we bring to the table. I believe there's another one called talk, right? Every time we share a GoFundMe for someone that we love, or talking on social media, every time we tell a friend about a need or an opportunity or something that we're participating in and it needs more people to get behind it, we are contributing just by telling the story, right? So retelling the story of others, retelling the need of others, that is a way to give. At the time, I was like, okay, I don't have any money. And I told him that. I was very candid and transparent. I'm like, I do not have the money to help you. I don't have the money to help myself right now. But I know people, and this is a good thing you're doing. You're providing, basically he was developing a mentorship program through the platform of soccer, which is exactly what we were doing. So I said, let me just talk to people. So I was going to parks. I would talk to random strangers that were playing soccer. I'm like, hey guys, I know you don't know me. Could I have 5 minutes of your time? And I'd tell them, and then I'd end with saying, we had worked out a deal with Score Sports based out of Long Beach. We said, we don't ask people to do things that we aren't already doing or that we aren't doing for free. We also don't ask people who don't know us to just donate their other businesses. We don't ask them to just donate their resources. But I said, you have more bandwidth, you have more buying power. So I went and talked to them and I said, would you guys be interested and willing to tack on an order of 200 soccer balls to an existing large order you're making and then just pass those balls on to me at cost? I'm not going to be using them. They won't be here locally. They won't compete in any of the markets that you're selling to. It will significantly increase our ability to give if we can just pay the cost of goods instead of the markup. To their credit, they did. They agreed to Score Sports. We were getting a $24 soccer ball for $10. For clarity, where I grew up, that $24 soccer ball was a priceless soccer ball, meaning there was no price that you could pay to get access to that quality of a soccer ball. They just didn't have them where I grew up. I would give my little spiel and I'd say, if you donate $20, I can buy 2 soccer balls. And if you give $40, I'll buy 4 soccer balls. So I'll take pictures of the kids and you can see exactly who got the soccer balls. And we're giving it to an organization that is going to bless these kids over and over again. With great high-level training. I talked about character development, all this stuff. And so we raised the money, raised a bunch of it, and talked to friends. My first mentor in business, Irv Braun, donated a bunch. He had forgotten to send the money in before he had left on a trip. And so I actually reached out to him while he was on vacation. I was like, hey, you had said you'd send this amount. He was like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he had told me he would send $200. And so I was just asking for the $200 in our interaction. He was like, oh, did I say 5,000? And I was like, oh, no, you said 200. Be very much appreciated. He's like, okay, no problem. Give me your information to wire it. And then I got a wire transfer for $2,000, right? And we had $1,800 committed that never came in. So I'd spent that on credit cards. And then Irv showed up and he didn't even know it for years. I told him years later. He probably doesn't remember, but I told him years later, I'm like, man, you sent that $2,000 and that covered all the money that hadn't come in, that had been committed, that I'd already spent.
Yeah, that was incredible.
It was so incredible.
Yeah, we had, I had high school friends donate $20 or $50, and then we had other Soccer Shots owners were part of a franchise system, so other franchise owners from around the country donated gently.
College friends.
It was really cool. That
tree planter friends. We had friends from my childhood.
Yeah.
It was a big collection of people.
It was a big grassroots initiative.
20 and $40.
And we made it. We cobbled it all together. you and I and our ex-business partner flew down there. We were there for a couple of weeks. It was a really special experience for me. I got to see where you grew up for the first time in the jungle, and we donated this stuff. We taught Leo everything that we knew about
Well, you
business.
said that I was going down there to teach business. I wasn't initially going down there for that. I was going
Yeah,
to teach
once we
soccer.
got down there,
Yeah.
then I think that we realized like, oh shoot, this guy doesn't really even know about like the, you know, even setting up a personal bank account and a business bank account or basic marketing or, you know, like
Or budgeting.
So, yeah,
like, yeah.
so we really dove in, and it was really the start of something that we didn't know was getting started. So that was the first initial donation project. And from there, it was sort of like every year, every other year kind of thing where we would have a project pop up. Someone would reach out and say, hey, I heard you did this, or, you know, I heard you can do this. And we would kind of do that type of donation model project in countries like Rwanda, Ethiopia, where else?
We sponsored programming in Kenya, and then we kind of stumbled on Cameroon. But I want to touch on Rwanda real quick because there was one conversation that I really think influenced the trajectory of the entire nonprofit organization and even the vision for what it could be. And I went there and I trained 100 kids a day for 5 days by myself. And I was modeling how to position yourselves as a mentor rather than just an educator of a skill set. And so I was working with teachers from 41, 42 public schools in the Kigali area through an organization called Wellspring. They had a private school where they also were training teachers. So I had an opportunity to go there, use their facilities. 2 of my friends in college had launched that nonprofit. So that's how I heard about them. And so I was training and we were teaching, and I was starting to have those questions. I think they're important to ask yourself, like, hey, I'm a year or 2 into this. Am I doing what I set out to do? Or have I just kind of like coasted along? Is this donation trip looking a lot more like a surf trip? That's the type of questions that you need to ask yourself, right? And so I was questioning, like, should I have sent a doctor who could have maybe saved an actual life? Or should I have sent a construction team to build something?
Were you questioning like the validity or the worthiness of the cause or what you were doing?
The execution. Like, are we executing optimally?
Okay.
Like the money that we're giving, is this what we should be doing? Or should we be sending a construction team or a doctor? Like, because we could pay for that instead, but we're just coming and running a soccer camp.
Right.
Like, where's the long-term value, right? And so Rwanda went through a genocide in the early 90s. There were 2 people groups. One had all the decision-making control of the country and the other group didn't. And that lasted for a certain amount of time. The group that had way more people in it, that had no decision-making ability, revolted. And so it broke out into a large civil war that turned into a genocide between the people groups. I was there. They paid for me to go to the genocide memorial. And I was going through and I was like, oh, I learned all about it. And, you know, I'd seen the movie Hotel Rwanda, so I knew a little bit about what had happened in the early 90s. But going through that genocide memorial, like the story of how it all unfolded and then what happened and then the impact they were still experiencing to that day, I was just like, whoa, this is heavy, right? And there's a hallway at the end, at least there was back in 2013. There's this hallway, it's kind of a curved hallway, remember, and there are pictures of children from happier days that were brought in by families to memorialize their children so they're remembered forever. And it gave a little description of the children, you know, like their favorite food, who they spent time with, and then how they were killed, how they died. And there was a little boy there, a picture of a little boy. He was 5 years old, and my oldest was 5 at the time. Asher was 5. And it said a bunch of stuff, and then it said something along the lines of like, he, you know, the last thing he said or did was ask his mom where he could run to be safe, and mom had to make a decision. Do I tell him he's going to be safe running away? Do I, like, what do I do? And she looked at her son and she just said, basically, run, sweetheart. You'll be safe if you run. And so the child ran away believing that he was free, and he was shot and killed as he fled. And I started crying. And there were like 7 people in the hallway, and everybody was like on their knees or just slumped down on the ground, just crying. And it's just very, very impactful and emotional. So I go back home and that's when I was like, what are we doing? Like, I've just learned all about this genocide and I'm here punting a ball around on a soccer field. Like, what are we doing? Right. And so the next day was a Saturday, and I was teaching them how to write curriculum. Everything we do is sustainable. I don't bring them, a 15 lesson plan thing and say like, here you go, run that 15 lessons and then run it in a loop for the rest of your life. I teach them how to write their own curriculum. So we identified 20 character themes that were important to them. And then I brought a list of 100 different games and an explanation for how to play each of the games. And then we would pick a skill for the day, and then we'd build out a curriculum, a 7-step curriculum, similar to what we do with Soccer Shots. And so the kids would work through, and you keep touching on the theme. Now, when I first got there, I had said this is what I was doing, but they brought teachers from everywhere. And so there were geography teachers, science teachers. So I walked in the classroom the first day, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are all like coaches and athletic directors. Like, oh no, it's a science teacher, math teacher. So I quickly realized that this translates everywhere. Like, all they have to do is write appreciation on the chalkboard, and your theme of the week has been appreciation, just like what we're doing, right? And so I knew that we were having some impact, and we were talking to them and we're giving them some tools so that they would understand the different strategies they needed in order to reposition themselves or to solidify themselves as mentors in their communities. But I was still just punting a soccer ball around, right? So that Saturday we were writing curriculum, and they brought 5 children in, one from each of the days I'd coached, because each day there were 100 different children that were brought in from the area for us to teach. And on day 1, I ran everything. And then on day 5, the staff I'd been training ran most of the class. And that was the goal, was to hand it over. Day 1 was pretty tough, 100 kids by myself with a lot of people watching. And so they brought these 5 kids over. They gave me a carving in the shape of Rwanda, and they had hand carved the words "thank you" into it, right? I still have it. It's actually in my workout room over there. So it's my motivation all the time. And they each gave an impact statement. And this 7-year-old boy went, and I still remember it because we had the quote up on our wall for 5 years in our office. And he took a deep breath, and he said, "Thank you so much for coming here." He goes, "I don't have a father, and no one's ever taught me about football before." They call soccer football. And so he said, "No one's ever taught me about football before. So I'm so grateful that you came." And then he took a deep breath, and he said, "What mattered the most and what I'll never forget is that you came here, and you didn't care if I was good at football or bad at football. You didn't care if I was a boy or a girl. You just came here and you loved me." And he said, "I'm going to remember for the rest of my life how you made me feel. And I'm going to pray for the rest of my life that you and your family get to make more children feel the way I feel right now." And I was like, cue the waterworks. Like, I'd just been struggling. I'd just been through this emotional experience at the Genocide Memorial, gotten home the evening before. I was thinking about it that whole night. I was praying about it. Like, are we doing the right thing? Like, what should we be doing? Right? Just trying to figure this out and ask myself all the right questions and see if we were executing this vision that I had for what I wanted to do. And then that kid articulated exactly what it was, right? But soccer for many, many families is viewed as a pathway out of cyclical generational poverty. A very, very low percentage pathway out. But it is a high percentage pathway into the community. So you can come in and get invited into neighborhoods, into communities, into homes just by bringing soccer or football, right? And we've sponsored trainings in other parts of Africa where we've sent teams out, and they have gone into really rural areas with water bottles that they fill up with sand and water, and that's their cones. And we teach them how to be resourceful. And then they come in and they run these free little soccer camps. All the children come to participate. Then they dismiss the children, and then they talk to the parents about HIV/AIDS awareness and water safety, boiling water and stuff. So we've used soccer. We understood that it can be a platform, right? And so for us, we just recognize, like, wow, we can get into areas and build trust just by providing free soccer for their children.
Right.
And then they'll listen to the message that we have to bring, the importance of boiling water, things like that they may not have heard. And we have a captive audience that'll listen. That conversation with that child, then that was the perfect moment for receiving the message from someone on the receiving end, receiving the message from them saying to us, like, this is what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I see. I'm 7 years old, and I see it. I see you. I see it. Amazing.
It reminds me of this quote I read. It's like, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, but what matters most is how you made someone feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really rang true in that situation. So it all started with soccer, right? Yep. And it's become
and it all started with time, talent, and talk with no treasure. We had no money.
Right.
So we started all these projects without the resources to do it. So that's the huge encouragement to anybody who's thinking, like, how can I possibly start? It's like, you can tell people about great things that you hear about. You can lend your skill set, your ability.
Use your voice.
Yeah.
Use your talents. Use your abilities, your unique ability. Use your time to highlight causes that are important and impactful to you. So it started with soccer and it's become so much more than that. So in recent years, like you said, it brought us to Cameroon, developing trust in these areas where you're going in and you're working in. And in Cameroon, we created a relationship with an incredible person, and he is our director of operations there. And we have a high trust relationship with him.
Yeah.
He's our boots on the ground guy, and we could not do what we do there now without him. So talk a little bit about that relationship and what has all transpired in the last handful of years in Cameroon.
So I'll tell the initial thing and then we'll skip forward a bit. I would plan the trip as a self-contained trip. Like, this is the project, this is what we're leaving them with, this is how it's sustainable thing, and then this is the skill set that I'm leaving with them so that they can keep doing it. But I was also looking for somebody who was doing a lot already on their own with no access to financial support or resources to execute. And so I worked in the French-speaking part of Cameroon first, and then I went and did work in the English-speaking part as well, which is amazing to see the variations within the same country. And I'm like, okay, I would like, 8 to 10 kids from to 10, 12 years old to come out. I'm just going to show what we do and teach mentorship. And I get there and there are 50 children from 3 to 17 years old. And I am like, oh my gosh, how do you train 50 children for a quick 25-minute demo class? So I divided them into 2 groups and I started trying to coach them both. And all the other coaches that had brought their children there to experience this and see this, they're all sitting under a tree in the shade, just comfortable. Except for one coach. He comes out from the back, one of the youngest ones, he's about 24 at the time, comes out from the back and he just goes, "You need help." I was like, "Yes, I do." So he looked at my curriculum. My roommate was there with me at the time. My roommate was helping a lot with all the things.
I thought I was your roommate.
No, not at the time. My roommate from college,
Okay.
My college roommate. You were my roommate at home.
So your college roommate from like 20 years ago.
Earlier. Yeah, came along. And he was doing all the stuff that was helping us to execute it well and on time, right? And so he would run and set up all the cones super quickly. I'd be like, "Daniel, we're running out of water." He'd race over and fill up like 6 water bottles really fast. He was the one that was making the rhythm happen and making things happen well and on time. And so I was like, "I think you need to go help this other guy because he has never seen the curriculum before and he's taking the older group." And so Daniel goes over with him, comes back 2 minutes later, and he's like, "That guy doesn't need any help." It's like, he just fixed one of your games. And I looked over and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that is a better way to do that." And so, "Yes, Daniel, please come and help me." And so after that, I kept in touch with him. And he was working with another nonprofit at the time. And I was always hesitant to disrupt things that were already in place and happening. And so I just waited. And after a couple years, I knew that there were some financial issues with that nonprofit and maybe there wasn't enough money to keep everybody going. And so I reached out and said, like, "Hey, I would love to bring him in and work as the director of my organization. Is this something that would work for you guys?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah. Okay." So very amicable, brought him over into our side of the organization. And we didn't even have any money to pay him at the time. Didn't have money to pay ourselves really at that time. So brought him over and we started doing projects. Because after that class that he helped me, he invited me to go and be a guest observer of his academy. And I saw him before practice started do an HIV/AIDS awareness training for all the teenage girls in the group. And then the boys as well. And it was a really cool little thing that he did where basically he had some coins and hid it behind their back. And all the kids would stand in a circle with one kid in the middle with their eyes closed. And they would pass the coin around and then they'd freeze. And the kid in the circle had to guess who had the coin. Kingsley's point was that you can't tell who has the coin just by looking at them. You also can't tell who has HIV/AIDS just by looking at them.
Right.
And so he was giving examples that they could understand. Be like, "Oh, okay." The first years of being HIV/AIDS positive, you look healthy, you look fit, you look fine, right? And so his point was like, you guys are making choices and mistakes without all the information. And then moved on to coaching soccer, right? But he had a captive audience. It was right at the start of practice. And I was like, "Oh man, he gets it. He gets this." And so we started working with him. Our first priority was figuring out how to support his soccer academy, which we did. He now has youth teams all the way up to professional men's and women's teams. And he does all of that as one of the many things that he does. And then he started telling me about the issues of the crisis and the conflict that's going on in Cameroon, the civil war that's breaking out. So he started talking about real and practical needs way outside of soccer. And what could we do? How could we be participants in helping people that are unheard and unseen. And so that really became the focus of our nonprofit. You can't create a voice for them because no one's listening. There's no one listening. And so I can yell louder and I can make more posts online, but it was time to actually transition from talking about things and telling people about things to financially, using our treasure, our talent, our time, our treasure, and our talk, using all four to positively impact the lives of people who were simply in a position where they could not advocate for themselves. And so how do you build trust? There's lots of ways, and none of them are easy, and some of them are very horrible experiences, but you can build trust by showing up for people in the middle of the darkest times, right? And so there was a terrorist or a separatist organization that wants to split the English and the French part of the country apart. The separatists had said no more schooling. And so what happened was from 2017 on, there was no education provided for children. And so Kingsley kept saying over and over again, we're losing a generation. They don't know. And we have to fix this problem by educating children. And so finally, a school got permission to open, but a lot of the separatists, like the terrorist groups, the way they work is they're in cells, right? And so that if you capture one, it doesn't compromise the other ones. One of the cells had disagreed with the school being allowed to be open, and Kingsley saw them go by with their guns and went chasing to see where they're going. Unarmed guy in his late 20s at the time, just sprinting after 15 armed men. And then he heard the shooting, and they had attacked a school and killed a bunch of kids. And so Kingsley called me from the school, and I was pacing around in the backyard here, and I could just hear people screaming. I'm like, we are a freaking soccer company. Like, this is way more than we can manage. And I think the fact that we have managed it and managed it well is a testament to all the people that we've collected and drawn into this as being more than just a little soccer company. Mm-hmm. And so we paid for the funerals of all the children that were connected to our academies. So it's 3 of the 7 that were murdered during that school shooting. And then I sent a little bit extra for Kingsley so that he could feed the kids who were coming over and, take care of people that were coming by his house for just some kind of guidance, right? He took that money, divided it by 4, and gave it to the other 4 families of the children who had been killed to help pay for their funerals, because the families didn't have money to pay for funerals. The government came and said they would pay for the funerals, but the families believe that if we take government money, it'll put a target on the rest of our family, and we'll lose all of our children because the terrorists will attack the funeral because it's financed by the government. Right. Or separatists is what they call themselves. And so we stepped in and paid for the funerals. And, at first it's easy to look at other cultures and customs and be like, oh, it's so interesting how they do that. It's so different. And they honor the place and the standing of the person who's passed away with the funeral, the quality of food. Is everybody getting fed? What's what is the ceremony like? How long is it? All that stuff, right? And at first I was like, oh my gosh, but we do the same thing. You can put a $90 plywood box together and bury a loved one, or you can spend 15 grand on a casket. You're just showing how much you love them and appreciate them with all these different things, right? Where the ceremony is, what it looks like, what the reception looks like. That's all. We pump tons of money into it. So it's the exact same thing. No different, just a different way it's experienced. And so because we paid for these funerals, which were a massive event, we built trust with the community, because they were like, no one's showing up. We can't trust the government's money. We can't trust the separatists because they're the ones that killed the kids. We don't know who we can trust, but there's some stranger and his family, and they paid for all these funerals and they've never met us. And that's ridiculous. Why would anybody do that? Mm-hmm. So it started like a lot of questions. Okay, well, who are these people? Kingsley started talking about the B7 family, this family stuff, right? And at one point I told him, like, Kingsley, you don't need to tell people about our family. You should be the mayor of this town someday. You can take all this credit. You're doing all this work. And he said, no, you don't understand. He goes, talking about the B7 Foundation is what keeps me alive. It's not my money. I don't have any access to this money. And if people thought I did, then I would be a target. But the fact that I just represent an organization and I don't actually generate any of my own money, and the money just comes specifically for projects and pays for projects, that saves my life. That's why I tell everybody. And I was like, okay, you can tell everybody. But I wanted him to take full credit for it. But because we want it to be sustainable. I've experienced when projects in developing countries are financed and controlled and owned by external sources, that when those external sources are not there anymore, the project ends. And so I was thinking like, man, if Kingsley is the face of all this, then if something happens to us, it still keeps going. When the truth was that by making an organization the face of it instead of us making B7 Foundation, then we're all just a representative of this cause, right? And so that's what B7 Foundation is. It's a cause that is serving communities that don't have a voice and don't have an ability or capacity to speak for themselves or be heard. And so then Kingsley came and he's like, we need to start an elementary school. So now we started an elementary school, right? They named it Amanda School for Bright and Gifted Children, named after you, which is awesome. And you donate a portion of your revenue that you generate to help with that school. Then we saw that they had no access to safe drinking water. So then I'm like, they have no water? Kingsley's like, no water, and a massive cholera outbreak. So I'm like, man, I don't know how to dig a well. Kingsley's like, neither do I, but YouTube. So we YouTubed it and figured it all out. Then found out about food insecurities exacerbated by COVID, and found out about an opportunity to go and learn how to farm. I think I mentioned this in another episode, but like farmer. My dad was a farmer on our missionary base. He like had a little bit of land and farmed animals and stuff doing this. And now we have the B7 Foundation Agriculture School in Cameroon.
And you actually went in October for a month to Kenya.
Yeah,
and
October
learned
20,
how to do this.
2023. Yep.
Yes. So you learned a really cool farming method you can tell our listeners about it.
I'll give the overview of the simplest version.
Sure.
This just tells you like what they've developed and how incredible they are. So you can take land that has had all of the nutrients burned out of the soil through fertilizer. You can take land that is very poor growing land and you can turn it into fertile land. All you have to do is you map out a 5-foot by 20-foot area and you mark it off. Put little stakes in the ground and a little ring around it of string. And then you dig down 12 inches and you remove that soil, right? Then with a pickaxe, you loosen up the next 12 inches, so a total of 2 feet. In preparation for this, you collect all of your compost, all of your food waste, some plants. It's kind of specific which ones you can use. Some animal feces you can use, but not all. And you collect all that and you let it like rot and ferment on your property at a different area. And then you bring that and you put a thick layer on top of the broken up 12 inches, right? And then you put the soil back on top of it. Now you have a big mound and it's ringed off with this string. You cannot walk on that land. You compress it, it steals what it's about to do. So you can't walk on it. But you have just transferred that into a 5 by 20 plot of fertile land that will be fertile for 5 full years. So you don't have to do it once every 5 years. Amazing. And then you grow your crop in that area. You'll put crops in there like marigold, because a lot of the insects don't like the smell. So you'll put some marigold flowers around. You have a really beautiful garden, but it all serves a purpose. And then you partner crop. So you put crops together that the insects don't like both crops.
Right.
So they won't jump, they won't like plow through all of it. They'll hit crops they don't like, and then they won't make the leap to the next crop. And so we learn all that technique. So we opened a farm.
And you learned all of this through an organization called Thrive for Good.
Thrive for Good in Kenya.
So you worked with them in Kenya. You were there for a month and you learned how to be an African farmer.
Yeah, I was the only Mzungu in the course. And Kingsley and I, they recognized right away that we were different than the other students. The other students were there to learn how to open their own farms. We were there to learn how to do exactly what they were doing. We wanted to start a school and pass this information on.
So then you came back home and Kingsley started this school in Cameroon on some land there, and it's the B7 Agriculture School.
Yep.
And so we fund that, and we graduated students this year.
47 women. We graduated in the spring.
And they went back into their communities and they started their own farms, and now they're teaching other people how to do this.
Kingsley messaged me today, right before we started recording this, and he forwarded me text messages from a community 5 hours away from our school saying like, can you come and remotely teach this to us? Just teach us the skills so that we can farm. Because in the area, all they grow is cacao. It has a super long growing season, 1 harvest a year. It is not for nourishment. They sell it, right? And so this is teaching 6 nutrition crops and 2 medicinal crops, including Artemisia, which is what all malaria medicine is made from. And so we teach them how to make their own malaria medicine.
This is a ripple effect. When you talk about sustainability, like this is everlasting, right? And it's changing a community and reaching further out than we could have ever imagined. So, all of this started from one small soccer donation when we really didn't even have the resources to, and so that's what I want our listeners to hear, like even when it doesn't make any sense and when you don't have the resources, like there is something you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Just say yes, because you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know the ripple effect. You don't know how far it extends or the amount of people that it will affect by just saying yes, taking one small step forward, doing the next right thing or the next best thing, right? So it's been really cool to be part of this with you and to contribute to it and to walk alongside you. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how this impact that you and I have done, the things we've started, the things we've said yes to, how that impact has reached not just people in other countries, the people that we're serving, but our employees, our family, our children. What types of beneficial impact have you seen here at home because of the work that we're doing overseas?
Well, we talk about giving through the 4 T's, and one of them being our talent, right? And so I am an entrepreneur. That is my skill set. And by connecting and linking these 2 visions together, the local impact through the platform of soccer with the international impact that starts with the platform of soccer and then branches out so much broader than that, my skill set is in building organizations and attracting people. How do you keep people? You have to attract them to the filter of your values, of your why. And, we serve a greater purpose than teaching a 3-year-old to kick a soccer ball straight. We want to positively impact communities. We want to create remarkable experiences for families here locally. So when we invite people in, we're like, hey, you're going to do something here that is more than soccer locally. You're going to mentor kids. Unfortunately, 1 in 5 children are abused by the time they turn 12 years old in North America. And of course, we think of abuse as things like sexual abuse and stuff, but there are many forms of abuse. A parental figure or a guardian figure telling a child they're not good enough over and over and over again changes them. It changes their psyche. It changes how they feel about themselves and see themselves. And so that is a form of abuse, right? So when we're talking to our coaches, we're like, you need to understand those numbers and show up and love every day, because nothing else.
Our Soccer Shots coaches here in North America might be that child's only bright light or bright spot.
Or they're looking forward to all week, right?
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about mental health, and we are huge advocates for mental health and self-care. And we tell our coaches, we're not asking you to pretend you're not going through a crisis or a challenge. But if you choose to step onto what we call Soccer Island, you are choosing to give those children the best 45-minute class that you've ever given. That every time, that should be your intention.
The best part of them.
The best part of their day. The best 45 minutes of their day, of their week. And that's our goal, right? That's how you create a remarkable experience. A remarkable experience means people make remarks about it, right? And people will talk about the best experience of the day, the week, the month, the year. And so that needs to be your intention, is to give that child that. I had an early experience with a child who was very challenging in 2009. I was not in the great headspace around that kid because, he made it so hard to coach the class and get through the curriculum. I thought everybody was judging me. I thought the parents were judging me. Oh, this guy's terrible. He's a terrible coach. He's probably going to be a terrible dad. Like, you're in your head about all this stuff, right? And at the end of one of the classes, he had kicked all my cones away, he'd flipped the goal over, picked the ball up and threw it, all because his team won, but he didn't score the winning goal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is challenging. So I walked him back to class, and I came back, and a bunch of moms were sitting there waiting for me. And I was like, oh man, they're just telling me like how bad I am. And I'm picking up the cones, and they're all standing by a corner, and I'm picking the cones up. It just leads to them eventually. They're like, can we talk to you for a second, coach? I'm like, okay, prepare yourself, Jobin. Thick skin. They don't know you. They don't know who you are. They don't define you, all those things. And then they said, you're the most patient human we've ever seen in our life. And I was like, oh, thank you. And they're like, yeah, you manage a challenging interaction with a specific child, and you also give the rest of the children an incredibly fun class. That's so awesome, right? And I left like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I realized in the moment I'd been hiring the wrong coaches, right? I'd been focused just on their soccer capacity instead of looking for everybody's favorite preschool teacher, which is what I should have been looking for and who we now look for. Then I got through the season ended, and then I got a letter from this little boy's grandma, and she said, I want to give you a little story about my grandson. Father's out of the picture, wants nothing to do with the family. Mom's working 3 jobs. Grandma is the primary caretaker during the day, and I have stage 3 cervical cancer. And she's like, I was at the end of my rope in frustration. we had called my grandson to come to dinner, and he wasn't coming. He was playing video games, and I yelled at him, "You need to learn what respect is. You don't even know what it is." And he put his little controller down, and he walked over to the table, and he gave me a perfect definition of respect. And she said, I looked at him, and I was like, "Where did you learn that?" And he, through mouthfuls of food, said, "My soccer class." And so I looked into your program a little bit. I didn't even know he was in a soccer class. We looked into it, and our little grandson will be in your programs forever. And she said, we understand that he has challenges. We put him in the weekday class so that the teacher gets a little bit of a break on a Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday morning. And we also just signed him up for your Saturday class, but that's going to be behavior related. If he has a good week, he gets to come on Saturday. And so I wrote back and I was like, no, let him come Saturday no matter what. I would love to have 2 days a week with him. And so that was what I was inviting people to do when I was hiring them here. And that was already more than soccer, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was already starting to see the retention I was hoping for.
And for people at home who don't know, we teach soccer classes to 2 to 8 year olds, and there's soccer skills training, but we also have character development lessons. Every single week they're learning words like sharing, respect, determination, confidence. And so it's more than just learning how to kick a ball, right?
It's more than activity monitors. They're not just punting a ball around for 45 minutes. Right. They're playing fun games that reinforce skills.
You and other coaches of ours went to school to actually learn how to become a preschool teacher. So you are an ECE certified preschool teacher. And we teach these children social, emotional development through these classes. It's always been more than just soccer. But the fact that we're able to take it even a notch further and make it something more globally is just so special.
Yeah, we can say to coaches like, hey, I just want you to know, on average, your classes ended with 2 registrants more than they started with. That's amazing. That's profit margin right there, right? Like we're running the class already, and now you've added 2 more revenue generating participants. That's what we donate from. You can't donate from your expense account, right? You have to donate from the profit. So then we tell them like, that capacity to do that is a contributing factor towards the well that we dug for that community of 600 people that didn't have access to safe drinking water. And now none of them are getting cholera and none are dying from cholera. And that's because you excelled at your soccer class. Mm-hmm. That is a different type of an employment opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so especially
for the demographic that we're hiring. We're hiring kids who are like 18 to 24-year-olds. And we had a really interesting experience at a conference that we went to. There was a presenter, Jonathan Reynolds, a friend of ours.
From Titus Talent. Amazing. In the notes, Titus Talent, great organization. If you're looking for elite level, C-suite level directors, CEOs, CFOs, this is the guy to hook you up with a great match for your organization. Titus Talent.
He did a great talk, and he was talking about the values of different generations, right? Mm-hmm. And so like the generations that went ahead of us value things like security and stability, right? And
I was significant. That was my generation.
Excuse me. But the generation that we hire, like I don't even know what gen they are, but 18 to 24-year-olds in that range, they're valuing things like freedom and flexibility and purpose. They want to work for an impact, right? A purpose-driven, impactful organization where they have freedom and flexibility. And so we really, took that to heart. And it was something that we were already doing, but like we are really leaning into that, and it's really serving us well. And so inviting the kids who are working for us now, I can call them kids. We were closer in age when we started this organization, but now 15 years later, we're old doggies and they're kids. And so these kids come to work for us, and it's really cool. I hear really great stories from some of our coaches where, they go home and they tell their parents about like this amazing soccer organization that they work for, where they're like contributing to something bigger than them, right? A greater global impact. And we're inviting them into that, and they're really leaning into it. And it's really super special to be part of and watch flourish.
It definitely impacts our retention rate. Like we keep a lot of our core staff for a really long time. I talked a little bit about specific projects that we had accomplished, right? And we've touched on digging wells, solving food insecurities, addressing cholera, education, but we do a lot more than that. Violence is a part of conflict, and we're paying for hospital bills. We're transporting victims with our taxi company. We are paying for plastic surgery of a little girl who was tortured, as an example. and her face was damaged, and we were able to pay for the reconstructive surgery that she needed. We pay for cancer treatments for a widow who had just lost her husband, had 4 young children. We paid for all of her cancer treatments, and we're able to do that all through these classes. So we bring in staff to work for us, and they hear about us because they hear a great reputation about a great soccer program. And then they come in for the interviews and they hear about what we actually are, who we actually are, why we're actually in business. And, the challenge for us is nobody outside of our organization really knows what we do. I think, we have 10,000 players a year in our program now, in our Soccer Chefs program, which is wild. We started with 63, and I thought we were killing it. I remember calling you and being like, babe, 63 parents trust us with their kids. This is insane. And now there's 10,000 players a year in the program.
I think about it sometimes, like having all of those kids lined up on the streets.
Oh, man, that'd be so cool.
Like holding hands, what that line would look like driving down the road. And it's just, I can't even wrap my mind around that.
So cool. And I can't remember what I was saying. This doesn't happen. Usually this happens all the time where I'm like, just lose my train of thought. I'm doing pretty good on these.
Well, we were talking about inviting people in to that experience.
Yeah. And just, we're doing so much more than just the big headline ones that we're doing. We're doing stuff that we don't really talk about, where where there was an attack on a village recently, and, a little girl was killed, and because of the danger, everybody fled. Well, that little girl, her body's then left there. We don't want her parents to go back and find her. And so we send a team in. Our team goes in there, knows the area well, goes in under the cover of darkness, and then gives the girl a proper burial. So that her family can visit a grave instead of coming back and seeing that, right? And so we do things like that. That is so much more than kicking a soccer ball. And we're inviting people and we're telling them like, hey, there's a family that is going through a significant trauma and no one cares except we do. And that mom and dad hears the letter they wrote, right? And we share that with them. There's a little African baby named Joben out there. A family named their son after me, which is still wild. I can't even wrap my head around it. In February. So little Joben is not even a year old. He's February of this year he was born. And so that's wild. I wish there was a way where we could have a child named after our whole organization. That'd be so cool. And everybody could share that. But everybody does share this, and you and I are both really intentional about that. We pass on to every layer of every organization we're a part of and that we have the privilege of being caretakers for. We pass that on. Someone came up to me at the last conference we were at where one of our franchises won a bunch of awards, and they said, like, I can't believe you had your staff go up and collect the awards. That's so cool. I wish everybody had done that. But it just comes natural to us because we are so aware that I know nothing about digging a well. I know nothing about many of the things we do. I just attract people and talk about a vision, and then I release them to execute it. And that's something that I think has helped with our retention is people stay where they feel like they're making an impact and making a difference, and they stay where they feel like they're being developed and where they're being listened to, but they're also being like grown. They're growing, right?
Yeah.
And so that I think has been a key to our success. I want to circle back to last thing for me. We talk about using our talent, right? As an entrepreneur, that's my talent. And so how do we make things sustainable? Well, that's why we built a taxi company in Cameroon. I'm closing that loop because I mentioned it a second ago, but how do we make a soccer academy profitable? Well, people have struggled with that for years and years and years. During COVID, which was all bad, but then some good things came out of it, we had time to think about this project. How do we make this sustainable so if something happens to us, if our revenue stream ends? Because nothing's for sure. COVID should have highlighted that for everybody.
Right.
Unexpected things that are no fault of your own can cost you your whole business.
Nothing's guaranteed.
Yep, nothing's guaranteed. So I said, well, I'm pretty good at building organizations. I know how to do that. You're good at the structure of the organization that I built. You're good at making it work better. But I thought, man, we've seen multiple examples. Amanda Kulucha, there was an organization that we participated in sponsoring that was working with South Africa with children doing soccer. There was our good friend, a dear friend, Leonardo in Peru, who was running an academy that was struggling financially. And I was like, man, how do we make this so that it's sustainable? We can't keep sending money to pay coaches so that kids can attend for free because they're not paying, right? And the reason that the kids don't pay is because the only international academy really makes money is when a player advances and gets to the next level and the next level. And there's a trickle back of revenue that comes back to the original academy, hopefully, if it's done legally
with
above
scouting.
board. So they make it to this next club, next level, and then that money, that club pays the previous club, and it kind of comes back down.
Okay.
If your revenue stream is based on your one best player that you see every 4, 5, 6 years, when they stop paying, you don't kick them out of your academy. That's it, because they're
Right.
paying pennies to you just to keep things going, right? To replace the soccer ball that gets wrecked. You're not making much. But when they stop paying and see that they're not going to get removed from the academy, then none of their friends pay. And it's not these people have a lot of extra disposable income anyway. Now, what does the academy do? Wow, this donated academy, all this great new equipment, great business training, all this, it's great. Except now nobody's paying, so there's no money coming in. So the academy director can't feed his own family, and he can't hang on to the coaches. And then another academy comes along, and they said, like, hey, we'll pay you. And in fact, we'll pay you a little bit more than what anybody else can pay. All you have to do is bring 40 kids to our academy, right? Like, okay. So my friend was asking me, like, well, how can they afford to pay more? I'm like, because they're paying them with your 40 kids. They're bringing 40 kids over. The money that makes, they're paying the coach with that. And now they've got your best coach. I was like, well, what could we do so that they wouldn't leave? And so I thought of a taxi company, a motor taxi company, lower barrier to entry. You don't have to learn how to drive a car. Almost everyone can drive a motorcycle. And so I said, well, let's get moto taxis. And the way it works is that the driver comes to the location where the taxis are kept and then signs them out for the day. They'll pay $15 to the company to sign out the taxi, and then they're going to hustle to make that $15 back in the morning, and then they'll keep everything they make after that $15 for themselves, right? So what we say is like, okay, come sign out the taxi, $15. If you stop and you coach our soccer classes from 4 to 6, then you only have to pay our academy or our taxi company $7 to sign the taxi out. So now we've essentially paid them $4 an hour to coach with money that they would be paying back to the taxi company in order to have full-time employment. So now when a scalping company comes along and tries to take all the best coaches, they can't supply them with a full-time income, but we can, because they're full-time drivers who also coach, right? So that was the initial idea behind it. And then as things grew, we added more and more taxis, and we got outside of the coaching circle, and we started hiring great people. And so we hire through the filter of the values that we have, and we look for people who want to impact their community positively. And we say, here's how it benefits you, and here's how it benefits us, right? So it benefits you because you have economic stability. Your children have food to eat, and you can afford to educate them, right? Which helps their future. We benefit because you're tied into why we're in business. We're not just running motorcycle taxis around town. We are paying for teacher salaries. So how do we finance the school? We already touched on it. Your business, your EOS implementer business, pays some of their salaries, but the taxi company pays the rest of the teacher salaries. And so then we start an agriculture farm. And like we have 2 people come out right away that just graduated from agriculture college, and they're like, we want to work on your farm. We want to be instructors. Perfect. They're like, what's the pay? We're like, hold on, let's add 2 more taxis. And so we've been able to build out that taxi company, and that is the sustainable component where all of our previous projects, we don't have to keep putting money back into our previous projects. We just expand the taxi company. Someday we'll do a whole episode on Kingsley, probably highlighting everything he's meant to us and done for us, because he deserves it, and maybe a few others that have done incredible stuff. But one of the things that Kingsley's done really well is he manages all these individual projects and programs as one large thing under the umbrella of the B7 Foundation. So he's managing a school. He's the head of the school, the elementary and middle school. He's managing the agriculture school. He's managing his own soccer academies. He's managing a water supply and well digging and water pipeline company. He's managing all these things, right? And they all work together for one purpose, to serve the good of the community. And I love that there's no single name attached to this. It is the B7 Foundation, and every person that works at Soccer Shots understands that their hard work is building out that $50,000 budget that we use to execute our projects internationally and take on new projects every year. They know that there's an organization of people. They get told over and over again, every time Kingsley stands up and does a project, he talks about the B7 Foundation and all of the people that are behind it that support it. And so people who have felt unheard and uncared for, maybe for significantly longer, but for sure since the start of this conflict in 2017, they know that people that have never met them care about them. They know that there's people that have been unheard for years, and they know that someone's listening.
Right.
And I think that that's a powerful gift to give a community on top of the financial resources that we're doing. So we're trying to have a holistic approach to all these nonprofit projects where we're listening to people, we're listening to their needs, not the needs that we project on them and say we need to solve for them, but we're listening to their needs. Education, water, cholera-free water, food. As Kingsley likes to say, he's like, man, we are outperforming the UN. And I'm like, we are on a much smaller scale, but yes, locally we are outperforming the UN. And how this has impacted us and our kids, like our kids have a broad view of the world. Our kids understand dad's got to leave sometimes. I have to go on these trips. I have to go and teach people. We were talking about it, how probably towards the end of 2025, I'll need to go back to Cameroon to do some business training with some of our staff there, but then also to just talk to all of our taxi drivers. By the end of next year, we could be well beyond that. And so we need to have a conversation with them that ties them into the big picture of everyone that's working together. We now have financial partners who are helping us to fundraise. If you heard this and you want to be a part of something like this, b7family.com, you can go there and click donate. One of the things that's unique about us is 100% of the money that comes in goes to the people that need it the most. And so there's no money taken out for overhead. There's no marketing budget, no salaries for either of us. We do this for free.
The only people who get paid are people who were serving in the country.
In the developing country.
Nobody has ever gotten paid a penny.
Our website was built for free. Everything is free. When people approach us.
And this all stemmed from an article that you read in the Tampa Bay Times that highlighted the top 50 nonprofits
in the U.S. that give less than 4% of the money they raise to the actual project they say they're raising for. And so simple math, I said, okay, 4% of $1 million is 40,000. If I can build a nonprofit that is getting $50,000 directly into the hands of the people who need it the most, we will be outperforming $1 million nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I want to be super clear. There is a massive difference between a charity and a nonprofit.
Right.
So we are a charity. A nonprofit is a tax designation. And so we've run into that locally quite a bit where cities give huge discounts to nonprofits, not understanding that it's just a tax designation. It's like the NFL was a nonprofit for a super long time. And so the NFL could rent local fields here for $25 an hour that I had to pay hundreds of dollars to rent as a local business owner, simply because they were designated as a nonprofit. For years, they could do that, right? And so we have a nonprofit. We are not using a nonprofit as a tax shelter. We are using the nonprofit so that other people who want to give can get the tax credits and write-offs that they deserve.
Right.
So that registered 501c3 called the B7 Foundation. We are very grateful for the help that has started to come in because, like I said, our budget is $50,000 a year to help people, and that money comes out of our for-profit businesses. But last year, the needs hit $75,000 worth of needs that we could not say no to. I'm talking about a teacher, our third grade teacher who was caught and tortured in front of his children. We're not going to abandon him.
Right.
We're going to pay all of his hospital bills.
And the needs continue to grow. We just wanted to share part of our stories about our nonprofit
some of our why
work.
Behind our for-profit work.
And the needs will keep growing, like we said. Opportunities will keep arising, and we will keep talking about it. We have this great platform now to talk about it, and we are inviting people in to join us to make the world a better place. And it starts with us. It starts with why, and it's not about us, but it starts with us. So just say yes. If you have that thing, whatever that prompting is, it could be something so small. It could seem so minuscule, but you never know where it's going to go. So
and find your community. You know, you're certainly welcome, and we would love to have people join our community. Like I said, a $5 gift gets to a kid in Cameroon. $5. It's 100% goes to the people that need it the most. Find your community, because when you're doing some of these projects, it can be seeing the worst of people can be demoralizing. But when you have community around you, and we've mentioned the names of a few people that are our community, but if you find community around you, there's one simple truth that is underlying everything we've done, and that is that it is simply better together.
Great. Thanks so much for listening.
You see how I did that?
I do see that. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope something that we talked about today resonated with you. And if it did, comment in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.